Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. My name is Bree Pappin, and I am a museum coordinator here at the Rawlings Library in Pueblo, Colorado. And we're coming to you live today from the Pueblo City County Library District, Rawlings branch, and I'm bringing you unboxing history live. Today we are going to talk about flongs, flonged but not forgotten. Flongs are a really unique and diverse piece of our collection here at the Special Collections and Museum Services Department. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about flongs. They are not really well known, but they are making kind of a comeback in mainstream history. And uh, Flongs are the negative mold that are made from a form of set type. They're also referred to as stereotypes, and they can be used in a rotary press or a printing letterpress. Um, and they were made for just temporary use, maybe a few times through the print press, and then discarded. But it did revolutionize the way that newspaper printing in particular was done. Um, the Flong process was invented in Lyon, France, in 1829 by a French printmaker by the name of Claude Janot. It was a paper mache. He comprised the formula. It was a paper mache mold made with the aid of heat and pressure, particularly steam, um, with a set form of type. So the metal type that was used in printmaking and press printing was laid out, and a paper mache formula was laid across it, and it was rolled out, and then it was set with heat and pressure and steam, and then it was set to dry, and then it was peeled off and um, put to the side, and it could be used again and again for printmaking and for newspaper printing in particular. Um, Basically, it was just used a limited amount of times, and this flong, or prior to being called a flong, was called a stereotype. These were these stereotypes could be stored, and they were revolutionary because they would take a much less room than the printing press mechanisms and the press type, the um, block printing parts of the machinery. Um, the word flong is derived from the French flan, or Latin word flana, and the flong has become an integral part of printmaking during the 1800s, alongside huge developments in the 19th century of high-speed presses, paper making, and hot metal typesetting. Um, the flong is really a missing link to the print press stereotype process, um, and especially used in surprisingly comic strips, which were often recycled into the newspapers each week or several times a month. And certain fixed advertisements that would appear um, throughout the newspaper, whether in weeks, throughout months. And this would allow advertisers to be economical in their marketing and their budgeting. Further improvements were made, as I was saying, through the 19th century, and then more recently into the 20th century in the newspaper printing process. Um, the introduction of phenolic resin and resin processes and resin compounds were used in the flong process to actually help prolong them and last even longer. And it would allow for imposition of photography, of photographs, and a certain type of advertising. Um, the reason, what I'm going to bring you today and show you today in our unboxing history episode is a very important aspect of our collection, especially with the Pueblo Chieftain and the Star Journal of Pueblo. And we're really fortunate to have these these small collection of flongs now that we can refer to them as flongs. So we're very excited. So I'm going to get started and show you some really prime examples from our collection. First, I'm going to start with, I'm going to unbox it literally. And I'm going to start with probably what my favorite example is. This is from May 24th morning edition from 1934. And I really love this piece for many reasons. One is I wish I could see it a little better. One is that it has a really large advertisement. And you'll see that in the 20s and 30s, 10s, 20s, and 30s, the advertising, and especially for cigarettes and leisure products, were very big. They were trying to appeal to leisure time and different aspects of life. And this is a beautiful ad for Lucky Strike cigarettes. And this appears on the page 2 of the Pueblo Chieftain. So it would have also included important news, both locally and nationally. And it also has just fun advertisements. And, you know, it's really neat to see some of the graphic design from this era as well. So I really enjoy this. And at the bottom, you can see there's a comic strip. So this probably would have been, or a portion of it would have been used again and again in certain parts of the paper. There have also been times when they would cut the flong in pieces to place into other areas of the newspaper. So they would just use portions of it after time, and then it would be discarded. So the next example I'm showing you is from August 1st of 1955, and this is prime time in America. This is during the baby boom, and we have a wonderful sports page here from the Pueblo Chieftain from August 1st. It's summertime, and in addition to a lot of sports news, there's also a lot of travel news, and there was some really fantastic graphics for the dog races in Colorado Springs, for flying Continental Airlines to all kinds of destinations. You can go to Kansas City or Albuquerque, all the way straight from Denver. And this was also advertising the Pueblo Airport. So really interesting that, and they have nice graphics. And then there's also advertising for Budweiser. So all of the corresponding and correlating types of advertising would have gone on the like pages. So the lifestyle pages or the sports pages would have had corresponding or related advertising. Again, these are all made of paper mache and paper pulp, organic products. So it's amazing that they've survived so long. The next one I'm showing you is from September of 1940. This one is in a little not as good shape, but still preserved well. And it's simply an entire page of classifieds. And if you think about what's going on in the nation at the time in 1940 in September, we were kind of at the brink of World War II, at the opening of wartime. There are a lot of advertisements for loans and home loans and car loans and all kinds of things. So it's really interesting to see what types of things were advertised, especially in the realm of jobs in Pueblo. So it's very cool. So, and there's also advertising at the bottom in various parts of the classified ads. The next one is also one of my favorite. This is from November 12th of 1933, and this is the front page of the Chieftain. And this majority of this page is devoted to the resurgence of the mining industry in Pueblo and the surrounding areas, like in Leadville and La Junta and all different kinds of areas. And it's really interesting that the changes for the miners and changes for um, rights for miners and advantages for miners and the mines was happening at this time. But this is still a beautiful copy, front page from 1933. Next one is also from November 12th of 1933. It's page 11, so it's from the same paper that the front page would have come from. And this is football scores. So it's interesting that we still have a fantastic pastime. At this time, also, I believe they were starting to play games at stadium, and it just talks about different scores all around the country for college and of course our local scores for the high schools. So really cool. And then there's really an interesting, I believe this is a movie advertisement in the top. So the diversity is just really fantastic. And they were, in 1933, they were just really thinking about placement for newspapers, and they were thinking about just lifestyle. But it's important, they were voting just as much to the sports page as they were to the news. The next one is the oldest in our collection. It's from 1906. This is a really fantastic example. This is also a front page ad from the Pueblo Chieftain. Let me just swing around here. And it has a really large, significant, and very well illustrated political cartoon on the bottom. Of course, this is during really interesting time in America. We're kind of speculating into World War I, and all kinds of political factions happening at this time. This is a beautiful example. It's hard to believe that this is from 1906. It's over 100 years old. So it's 110 years old. So really beautiful piece. Interesting story about this particular one is that some of these items do have some donation provenance. And many times the Flongs were, when they were discarded, especially during the 30s, during the Depression, and a little prior to that, when the Flongs were discarded by the newspaper companies, they would be giving them away, or they would set them out by the trash, and people would grab them and they would use them for insulation because they were natural products, and it would surprisingly keep the home warm. And there have been many anecdotes that I found online in doing research for this particular program, where people have found Flongs into their walls when they moved into the home, or they're renovating their home, and they found Flongs lining the walls to keep the walls insulated. So very cool, interesting. The last one I have is from 1972, so you can see that there's quite a span from 1906 to 1972. This is the most recent example that we have. And again, this is from October 8th, so this is a really significant sports page for here in Pueblo. And we have the football scores for all of the high schools in 1972. We have at the top Bulldog Surprise, and it's for Centennial High School. And then there's a really big ad for Kmart at the bottom corner. Kmart sporting goods and tires, automotive. So again, relevancy to where where the advertisement is placed in the newspaper. So it's appealing to the reader. Maybe whoever is reading a sports page would also be interested in tires for sale at Kmart in 1972. So it's really fantastic. And as you can see, the graphics will have the use of a real-time photograph in the top. So you can see the innovation in the printing and just the finer quality in the printing and the difference between the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and now the 70s. So finally, I want to share with you two flongs that we have in our collection, but unfortunately, they don't have any correlating date. So I wanted to show those two just to give you an example of the range of materials that were used in flongs. The first is going to be, let's take this here. This is it's an advertisement. The entire page is an advertisement. And this would have been used many times. This is probably from the mid-60s. It's a full-page advertisement for Diet Patio Cola. Patio Cola was released in 1962, and Diet Patio Cola probably came out in 63 or 64. So this ad was fully devoted to advertising Diet Patio Cola, and it had real-time photographs of models, in exercise form, enjoying patio Diet Cola. So this probably would have appeared either on the back page of the newspaper, or maybe a large center advertisement in the paper. So this is made of a phenolic resin combination, and it would have, as I said, would have been used over and over again and would have given more economy to the advertiser. I believe Patio Cola was eventually distributed by the 7-Up Company and Mountain Dew. So it was a really fantastic example from that time. And this was also would have been used in the Pueblo Chieftain. So this would have been distributed by the marketing company for Patio Cola, and would have been given into the newspaper to be printed on a regular basis based on the advertising and marketing for this cola. So really fantastic. It's like the only example that we have of this type in the collection. So we are really fortunate to have the diversity of this. My final example today is, again, a piece that is undated, but still remains, and it's really an interesting piece. This is probably from the fall of 1933, as my best guesstimate. This comes from the society page of the Pueblo Chieftain, and it is also from my research that this came out every Sunday, and there was a 4-page or 5-page spread in the paper every Sunday devoted to the society page. It was something that was extremely active at that time, probably from the early to mid 30s to the mid 40s, was consistency of the society page. And as discussed before, we have correlating advertising in the society page with new for 1934, beautiful level riding Studebaker. And I wish I had the negative printed version of this so you can really enjoy the full graphic of the Studebaker. Also, it advertises coming to you and carried by Cruz Beggs department store, which was prominent at the time in Pueblo. It was the largest department store of its type. Was in 1933, so we're thinking we're in the Depression at this time. So it's talking about material that you can get and make your hostess dress and morning dress available at Cruz Bay. So I just think this is a gangbuster of history for Pueblo. And finally, in the society news, it talks about one of our graduates from Centennial High School as she chose to go to Yale University. So I think that's extremely modern, beautiful piece of history. And it's been a pleasure for me to bring these items to you from our vault and from our collection. And again, we are so very fortunate to have these items from the Pueblo Chieftain and the Star Journal as part of the collection at PCCLD. And I appreciate you joining me today, and thank you so much, and enjoy the program.